Yeah, great. Thanks, Christoph. So yeah, we do have a few minutes left to answer some of your questions. So feel free to ask them those to ask us those, sorry, in the question section of your control panel. You can also use the chat box. And while we do that, I just want to ask all of you one last question from our side. Since we were looking at recovery tests and how to perform those, we just want to see whether you currently perform any recovery tests yourselves, and whether you do so regularly, or whenever you happen to have time to do so. Maybe you haven't done any tests for a while, or you haven't done any at all, but you're thinking of implementing some of these tests. It'd be great to know where you are at the moment with that. Great. Thanks very much for your participation. I'm just going to close this and share the results. Great. So it's actually pretty evenly split. So it looks like everyone on this call is actually doing performance or recovery tests. Sorry, either quite regularly or not for a while when I have time. So it's pretty evenly split, but it's good to see that everyone is doing something along those lines, and hopefully the information you saw today will help you a bit more with that. So let's go over to a few questions. We have a couple more minutes left on this call. So Christoph, there's a question here on, we looked earlier, or we talked about MyISAM earlier. Have you any suggestions for a backup solution for MyISAM?
Yeah, I mean, with MySQL, the thing is that, well, I mean, like all of the tools, the methods that we covered here, they will work. So you can take a snapshot of the MyISQL. You can, let's say, take this backup of the MySQL database with MySQL tables using extra backup. The main problem here is just the locking, because as I mentioned in the webinar, to ensure that you have a consistent snapshot, consistent state of the database where the MySQL tables exist, you just have to run the push table with read lock and just stop the whole activity. So you can use any of the tools. It's just a matter of the fact that the database will be locked for that period of time. So it's, as I said, the MyISAM is, I mean, it had its time. Right now, it should just you should really think about switching to InnoDB if only it's possible.
Great, thanks, Christoph. And I think we have time for one more question. And that's, we're looking at classic control earlier, using classic control to do to organize backups. And there's a question here. How can I split MySQL dump into several files? Is it better to do one file per database or per table?
I mean, in general, splitting the database, I mean the dump, into multiple files is somewhat recommended, because it helps you to work with the larger amount of the data, as I mentioned before. To be honest, right now, I would have to confirm that if the classic control allows you to run the split database, the MySQL dump per table. If it is not, then we will definitely want to improve here. But in general, yeah. For the smaller data sets, there's really no way to. I mean, there's no difference between dumping the whole set and dumping the particular tables. But if we're talking about tens of gigabytes, then the difference start to happen, start to show up. On the other hand, if you are using MySQL dump for dumping like tens of gigabytes of the data, then the question is whether you are using a good tool for the job. Of course, it is possible to do it, that's for sure, as long as you're additionally using some other backup method. because then your recovery time will be long.
Cool. Thanks, Krzysztof. And there's one last question here, maybe, that I think we can still take. And if you know the answer, of course, Krzysztof, it's Christo here is asking, what format does MyDumper use to store the logical backups? And can MyDodo use a point-in-time recovery?
I mean, frankly, I haven't used MyDumper related to with point-in-time recovery. I've used it mostly for the upgrades. In general, it uses it stores the data in a SQL file, in SQL format. So it's somewhat similar to MySQL dump. The difference is that it can work in parallel. That's the main difference. But frankly, I would think I wouldn't use MyDumper to point-in-time recovery. I don't even think it's possible, because you have to, as I mentioned in the webinar, the MyDumper basically grabs only the data. There's no schema. To get the schema, you need to use MySQL dump for that, and it makes the process more complicated. So I would strongly stress to think about using, for example, extra backup instead, and use the MyDumper to ensure that you have an easy way to restore missing rows or something like that. But still rely on the one of the physical backup methods.
Excellent. Thanks, Krzysztof. And we've just arrived on the hour. So I wanted to thank everyone for participating in this webinar today. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, Krzysztof, for the presentation. We'll be making the recording of this and the slides available to you within the next couple of days via a blog post. So watch out for that. So thanks again for joining us today, and have a good rest of the week. We'll be in touch also with invitations for our next webinar, which will take place towards the end of July, and which will also be part of this Become the MySQL DBA series. So thanks again for joining us today. Have a good rest of the week, and talk to you soon. Bye-bye.